Hi, I'm Magma, the creator of The Invisible Zone. Welcome to Mastery, the grading scale. I know that this sounds very subjective, but it's not like actually grading someone's execution and the pattern that they saw. It's more like applying a grade to specific setups. The reason that I don't have anything below B plus is because anything below B plus is not really worth taking, not even really worth looking at. There's a few main components that can help us determine the grade of a setup. First will be what time frame is the POI from. Next will be, does the internal narrative support the external setup? This question, does the pattern look correct? It sounds subjective, but it's really not. By this point, if you're watching the mastery video, you should know that a standard double valid pullback is supposed to look like this. A DNB is supposed to look something like this. The hump is supposed to look like this with an invisible zone here that we can potentially get a reaction from. So we've got to ask ourselves, does the pattern look correct? And what I tell the students in the group every time when they ask me about the validity of a trade, I'll respond by helping them see if the pattern looks correct or not. And the last question that I want to go over, just for the purpose of this video, is there technical confirmation? Now, just because there's not perfect technical confirmation doesn't make it a bad trade every time, but it does make it a better trade if you can get that technical confirmation when everything else aligns on top of it. What I mean by technical confirmation, obviously we're talking about successful highs, failure highs, successful lows, failure lows, a true double valid pullback versus one that doesn't have a high or low in between the two. So right off the rip, obviously A plus is going to give the best answer to all these questions. What time frame is the POI from? Maybe a giant 12-minute invis or a 144 clear as day invis. Does the internal narrative support the external setup? Yes. That would be, for instance, you're getting respect on the internal greed boxes. You get bounces off of them as you march down, and then you hit the external and you go sending off in the other direction. That would be where internal narrative is supporting the external setup. Or for instance, you bounce hard off of an internal fear box down to the greed box that you're looking to take the trade from. That's another instance where the internal narrative supports the external setup. Does the pattern look correct? A plus says yes, the pattern looks correct. It looks like a double valid pullback when you want to see a double valid pullback. It looks like a DNB when you want to see a DNB. It looks like a hump when you want to see a hump. In A plus, you're going to get a perfectly validated low and then a perfectly validated high followed by a perfectly validated low that does not close below the first one at all. And you're going to get a beautiful long out of your POI and you're going to be rich, right? Now, maybe on an A, you've got almost all the criteria, but maybe the higher time frame POI is just a medium size, run-of-the-mill 12-minute invis. You still have the technical confirmation, you still have some internal narrative support, but maybe the pattern looks a little bit wonky. It's not exactly what you want to see, but it's not different per se. Maybe your second valid pullback looks a little bit like this, right? Or maybe your DNB looks a little bit like this, right? Not as clear, but it still is really good. It's up there, right? And then you've got A minus. Now, A minus is where the reason for taking the trade, the narrative behind taking the trade, especially like the higher time frame POI being there, is all there for you and it all looks great, but maybe you're missing a technical confirmation and you have to take risk off of one pullback instead of two. Maybe your internal narrative was supporting both directions, but you've got a larger box that you're looking to take a trade from. You get that perfect internal confirmation, the technicals are there, the patterns there, but prior to that it was going both ways. And all that's really indicating is that there's balance in the market. So A minus still isn't horrible. It just means that you might want to go with a little less size there. And then B plus I usually reserve for purely narrative based trades, so they have some technicals there if you look deeper into it, but like a B plus setup for me is if I see the hump occurring and I see a failure to close above this high here and I short down to the invisible zone, that is in the B category. That doesn't belong to the A category. Anything in the A category is going to come from three POIs: higher time frame high, low, and the higher time frame invisible zone. Anything in the B category, just like I said, it's only narrative based. For instance, you see that there's a hump occurring here. You've got leg 1, 2, and you're looking for the third leg, and you get some form of internal confirmation here that doesn't belong to the A list, but it's a solid confirmation according to market structure, and you take a long and try to hold it up to this area, I'm not going to call it a bad trade, especially if you're already more advanced with fear greed concepts and you know what you're doing a little bit at this point. I see a lot of guys in the group already who are taking trades based off narrative. Like I said, I take trades based off narrative from time to time as well, and it's not a bad setup. It's just, it simply cannot belong to the A list because we don't have the ability to stack confluences along with it. We're just purely going based off of pattern recognition with a little bit of structural confirmation, of course. I'm not a financial advisor, by the way. This is not financial advice. If you need financial advice, you should find a local financial advisor and consult with them directly. According to my strategies, as you go down in the grading scale, you would want to look for lower risk entries with less size. For the sake of not making this video an hour long, we're just going to cover A+ setups today. I did just touch on narrative setups, which is in the B category, but I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time. And a lot of this is in the eye of the beholder. I'm just trying to give you the questions and tools to use to help you decide the relative risk and the size that you're willing to put on a trade. My A+ setup. Let's go over it. This is a diagram that I haven't shared on Twitter yet, but the premium students have had access to it for a little while. There's other diagrams that are just available to premium that are not on Twitter, that will not be released on YouTube. But this A+ setup right here is enough to make you filthy stinking rich. I'm probably genuinely going to get flack for giving this out on YouTube from my moderators, but I just want to put one nugget out there. It's a free country. I can choose to do that if I want to, and this should do the trick for y'all. This is a very simple diagram. Here we are in the 12-minute time frame. First thing I want you to notice is the narrative on the internal. We've got an invisible zone between this failure low and this successful low. This low that was successful at running the high that it came from. This failure that was not successful at running the high that it came from. And in between them, we get a bounce right here. Now we march down and we reach our external invisible zone. On the 12-minute, valid pullback number 1 occurs. And then the 12-minute valid high occurs, meaning we've pulled back in the other direction. We know that occurs once we close below the candle that made the highest point here. Now, before we switch over to the 1-minute time frame, I just want to point out here, if all you've seen so far is you bounce off the invisible zone, you've given one valid pullback on the 12-minute, one valid high on the 12-minute, and now you're coming into the area that the first valid pullback occurs, this is where you're going to zoom into the 1. You've got all the narrative lining up for you. You've got an invisible zone created up here, a fear box that has created gravity for price to head towards. You've seen that greed boxes are currently getting respected. And now let's zoom in here. My favorite setup of all time is when the 1-minute double valid pullback occurs inside of the 12-minute pullback number 1. And what I mean by that is I leave these blue lines here that I have on this 12-minute candle. I leave these lines here, and I'm looking for these lows to occur inside of this low. And the reason I'm looking for that has to do with patterns. If I want my double valid pullback to look like a double valid pullback, then I at least need this second low to come into the vicinity of this first low. And I believe that the best setup occurs whenever this double valid pullback on the 1-minute occurs inside of the candle on the 12-minute that made the first valid low. And that's exactly what we get here. So on the 1-minute time frame, we get a double valid pullback occurring in the same area. That's making our pattern match here. As you can see, we've got a low, a high, and a low that is close to the first low, but it does not close below it. And on the 1-minute in here, that's what's happening right there for the trade. You've got a valid low, then you've got a valid high, and I'm not going to touch on this. If you want to dive deep into this and do some back testing on it, this is just a little nugget for you. Notice how 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 do not commingle. 1 and 3 commingle, but 1 is not commingling with 2, and same for the top of this low and the bottom of this high are not crossing each other. Do with that what you will. I'm not going to get into it. There's no mingling here, and that's a good thing. Anyways, valid low, valid high, another valid low that fails to close below, the first valid low. You get a confirmation with the closure of this candle, and you can enter your long right here with your stop loss manually below actually this low, because this is the higher of the two. When you're looking on longs, it's the higher of the two. When you're looking for shorts, it's the lower of the two. Stop loss manual, so if you were to close below this blue line, you're stopping yourself out. And your target can be external, because we're catching the beginning of an external move on the 1 minute time frame. So we're heading up to this fear box right here. Now, I'm not sure if I played price out after this what exactly happened, but I know that boom, we went smack dab in the middle of where we were supposed to go. That's a good TP right there. You probably should have TP'd along the way as well, looking at how many points this is. This is one of the setups that I take whenever you guys see on Twitter, or 100-point move this day, 100-point move that day, 80-point move this day, 2 50-point moves the other day. Brewski's catching 2 100-point moves in the same day. We're getting internal confirmation for an external move. Just one more little nugget I decided to throw in here at the end of the video. So here again on the 12 minute, we have this large invisible zone that we come and tap. We get a bounce from. This bounce gives us a valid pullback. After this valid low, we've got a valid high. And then down in here, let's go to the 1 minute. And you'll notice this is basically the same exact setup. The only thing is that the pattern doesn't look as perfect on this internal double valid pullback. You see price comes here, 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 but the narrative is the same. And look where the double valid pullback is occurring. You've got your 2 lows that occur in here. And this isn't the worst pattern in the world, right? Let's drag this up. Is it perfect? No. Does it do the trick? Yes. Your risk is below this low if price comes and closes below here. But still, even then, your target is external. Price comes back and taps that entry multiple times, but as you can see throughout the night, all it is just long, right? Now, I'm not saying this is what you would target. More realistically, you would want to be targeting this opposing zone here. And in that instance, yeah, you would have to hold through a lot of this. But even still, you could take a TP right here at this high for 67 points. You could get in here on the 1 minute and find something that you're comfortable with. These 1 minute invisible zones are beautiful for finding TPs. And even with a conservative one, you can still get many points out of them. You can be taking points all along this. I mean, it's really up to you, because the sky's the limit when you have a win rate this high and a strategy this reliable. I want to heavily encourage you to not start rating other people's trades. I made this video just for you to be able to rate your own trades. I don't want to see in the group or on Twitter people commenting to one another saying, oh, that's not A+, or oh, I give that a B- at best, or oh, that's an A-. Well, I like the pattern. I don't want to see any of that. This is just for you. This is not material that you need to be going over and discussing with one another. Just take what you will from it. I just want you to walk away with those 4 questions at the beginning of the video and ask yourself those questions every time you hit a POI that you're looking to take a trade from. You can decide as a trader, do you only want to take A+? Are you willing to take down to A-? Would you even consider taking something in the B category based on narrative? That's up to you. Just remember, only do what you are currently capable of doing. Don't stretch yourself past your current level of understanding. I promise you, there's plenty of money to be made if you can learn to just take A+ and actually force yourself to have the discipline to hold those trades for a while. You could still make more money than everybody else in the group just doing that if you had the discipline to hold these trades. So that's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next video. Philosophy, the origin of the invisible zone.